One of the perks of being a Bigfoot, man.
Is I've been alive. I'm 500 years old, and I'm in my prime.
All they do is drink kombucha and
when John Lennon showed up,
strict vegan diets. Yeah.
When John Lennon showed up, that's when the world really changed.
Yeah, that's when we had to go into hiding because we knew it was only a matter of time. They were going to start coming into the woods.
It's like they brought this.
But I was at Woodstock, man. I was there. Everybody was tripping balls anyway. Nobody knew.
They couldn't tell it was real.
Style in middle school.
I was one of those weird fedora kids.
I don't remember you being a weird fedora kid until like high school, late high school. Because you had the one fedora that you took everywhere with you, and that was like your pride and joy.
I love that hat. But I'm glad I don't wear that anymore. Looking back, it's like, oh.
Yeah, it looks pretty cringy.
Cringe.
I mean, that's just looking back in general.
Yeah.
We look back and
I had Echo. I wore a lot of Echo. Yeah.
Echo and South Pole were like the two popular name brands. It's like you don't see that anymore because it's like you're
gone.
I mean, the styles or the name brands are still there,
but
like South Pole and Echo are still a thing.
Are they? I haven't seen where.
I don't think they sell them in stores so much, but they still exist.
I see them periodically at like Burlington Coat Factory.
Really?
Yeah, Burlington, maybe Ross.
Yeah. I was going to say the Echo and South Pole. I just don't know if there's a comparable thing to that where it's a name brand and everybody knows the name brand. It's not the most expensive stuff, but it's not the cheapest stuff either. I don't know if we have that now. Everything's just.
Remember Fat Farm?
Fat Farm. Oh my God. Yeah.
The shoes with the giant P on the side. That was.
Do you remember Drunken Monkey?
I do remember Drunken Monkey. I was talking about.
They're all like JCPenney brands, and now I don't know that JCPenney has like a brand now.
I was more into Echo. I remember the outlets had the Echo.
Oh yeah. I remember going to JCPenney with like my dad, and like every other Saturday, go to like get a South Pole shirt or something every other week because you just had to have a new one.
Yeah.
Couldn't get another. They just kept coming out with new ones.
Timberlands, they're still around.
Yeah, Timbs are still around. I was just talking about those yesterday.
I saw a pair when we were doing some last minute Christmas shopping like 2 weeks ago. We went to I think it was Burlington, and there was a pair of the iconic classic Timbs, but they were like cherry red. And I remember it was like this was actually kind of a big deal back then. Oh, yeah. Like, everybody wanted these types of Timbs, and it was these ridiculous colors: the red or the
blue.
The blue, yeah. Blue was like I had the blue pair.
Did
like,
you?
Like dark navy, not like light blue.
Oh my goodness! I had a pair of those too. I think
had that. I remember my mom bought me a pair of like actual hiking Timberland boots.
You're like, what are these? I don't want these.
Pretty much. I was like, this is not because back in middle school you're so self-conscious about.
Oh yeah, because you're gonna get made fun of.
Yeah, exactly. And I refused to wear them. Like I'm not wearing these to school. And
but they're still Timberlands.
Yeah, but they're still
nobody cares.
Looking back now, I'm like, damn, those are actually probably a really nice pair of boots.
Probably wish I had those now.
Yeah, exactly. They were like actual hiking boots. I was like, oh, that's pretty legit.
Yeah.
And, it's funny how the older you get.
The name brand doesn't matter.
The name brand doesn't matter. Yeah, I could give a fuck now about. Like,
oh yeah,
if it's comfortable, if it's affordable, that's all I really care about.
Exactly. I don't have any issues going into a Target or a Walmart and buying whatever their store brand is, Goodfellow or whatever, and just being like,
it's comfy.
Or Old Navy even. Like Old Navy is like my go-to because Old Navy is cheap.
And it's
for the most part, and it's
stylish,
super comfortable
and comfy, and stylish. I love Old Navy. I think most of my wardrobe is probably Old Navy or Target.
That's the maybe that's the South Pole and Drunken Monkey of today's standards.
Today's Old Navy and Target.
It's not a name brand, but it's not a cheap one, and it's good fashionable clothing, good, smart, sensible fashion. Speaking of good and sensible fashion, welcome back to Shadows and Sightings, a paranormal podcast.
Hell yeah, good to be back.
Yeah, new year, new us.
Oh yeah,
not really, same us.
Same us. Different year.
New episode.
New cryptids. It'll be interesting.
Yeah.
I'm pretty pumped.
This will be our first full year
of recording.
Podcast.
Yeah. Recording.
Hard to believe because we started back in, was it July or August of last year?
I think it was something like that.
Man, we're coming up on that fast. But even though it's just January now, we're coming up on that. It'll be August before you know it.
Yeah, we were sitting out back, I think, smoking a stooge, and we were like, you know what? Let's do this podcast. We've been talking about it for years. Let's just go ahead and get this show on the road.
Yeah. And thankfully, we've had some listeners, and they've stuck with us. And we had Spotify Wrapped stuff, and there was like 3 people that had like our podcast as their most listened to podcast. And I was like,
are you serious?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
It's like, that's crazy. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Yeah. I was like, what?
I think the goal for this year is to really, so we have a product now.
Yes.
But continue to hone that product, make it better, and then also expand out and get more.
Absolutely. More listeners, more views, more downloads. We got so many things in the pipeline that we need to hunker down and get done.
Yeah.
New merch, new website, all that good stuff. But all of that is talk for a different time. Today we're talking about the granddaddy of them all. We're starting the new year off with a bang. Good old Bigfoot.
Bigfoot. He's the
he's the granddaddy.
Cryptid.
He's granddaddy of the cryptid world. He started the fad.
Oh.
He's the OG.
He really is. Because in the research we were doing, didn't we see something about the person who started researching Bigfoot, or really trying to bring Bigfoot into light with actual evidence, kind of started the field of cryptozoology.
Yes.
Yeah. And for those of you who don't know, cryptozoology is the study of cryptids, trying to find, classify, and produce factual and tangible evidence of the existence of cryptids.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there's like sub-genres too that kind of come out of that, I think.
Right. I was going to say, those guys you're talking about are Ivan T. Sanderson and Bernard. I'm going to butcher his last name, but it's Bernard Heuvelmans, I think. Maybe it's Heuvelmans. Heuvelmans.
Yeah.
Heuvelmans, I guess.
Heuvelmans.
But Ivan and Bernard, the founders of cryptozoology as we know it, trying to discover the things that are undiscoverable.
And for you, like when you hear cryptids, do you think strictly in terms of a biological entity, or do you think of terms of kind of the paranormal? Because I feel like when we hear cryptids nowadays, like Bigfoot is a dig, I guess, depending on the field of thought and how you look at Bigfoot. He technically could be like a biological entity, like an ape that we just had like an animal.
Right.
And at that point, if we discover him as like an actual animal,
he would be added to the animal kingdom.
Is he still a cryptid, right? Like, is he no longer?
He would not be a cryptid if there's solid evidence.
Yeah, exactly. So like, he would be, or is it, ghosts technically they're not cryptids, but they kind of still fall into that realm of like paranormal and like cryptids.
Yeah, I mean that kind of that opens the umbrella a little bit, because if you have if you think of it as an umbrella, paranormal encaptures everything that can't be explained.
Nope.
It's outside of the normal. Underneath that umbrella, sure, you would have hauntings, cryptids, so on and so forth. I can't think of anything at the moment.
Sure.
I would say when I think of a cryptid, I'm thinking a biological phenomenon, an animal or a species that has not been discovered yet. Whereas opposed to ghosts and hauntings and stuff like that, that's just paranormal activity.
So are aliens cryptids or paranormal then?
I would say they're paranormal.
Because they could be biological. I mean, technically, most people say they're biological, but we
entities. Wouldn't see. But an alien, it wouldn't be a biological thing you would be able to find here. So it's still out of our normal. So, which I guess technically a Bigfoot, if you would find a Bigfoot, that would be outside of our normal too, because it's an 800-pound, 9-foot-tall gorilla walking around, huge dong, swinging back and forth, asking for garlic and cups of sugar.
What do you you think that's how he rings the doorbell? Just like
dick first,
ding dong, and just like it's like his third leg. It's an appendage.
His third leg.
He can move it though, so just. How are you ringing my doorbell right now? You're holding a plate in your both hands. How are you ringing my doorbell? Just like,
I think you know. I think you know how I'm ringing your doorbell right now. But yeah, so I don't think that an alien is technically cryptid. I mean, again, that's paranormal umbrella, ghosts, hauntings, cryptids. aliens all can be under that same umbrella. Doesn't mean they have to be the same thing.
Sure.
I just think the paranormal itself captures all of those things because it's anything that can't be explained with scientific fact.
True. That's fair. Yeah, and I mean, I think with Bigfoot though and cryptozoology, it really is the first attempt to tie actual scientific research methods and blend it in with like folkloric,
and paranormal research as we know it. Yeah, because you're looking at them doing casings of footprints that they find and DNA scans on hair that they can't explain. The FBI even has a file on Bigfoot. So
it's pretty bad. Like the one drawback thing with Bigfoot though is a lot of it's like anecdotal. So, like Janice Carter talking about the encounter with him coming up and asking for garlic and how my family's been talking for 3 generations.
I was going to say, we should give a little context to who Janice Carter is. She was a part of a documentary. The book that was written about it was called 50 Years of Bigfoot. And basically it's a firsthand account of this woman who has grown up in the backwoods of
Tennessee,
bumfuck somewhere.
Tennessee.
Was it Tennessee?
Yeah.
And basically she says that she's known a family of Bigfoots. Bigfoots, for 50 years. It's 3 generations, starting with the grandpa kind of Fox. So I guess in her, maybe he's the OG Bigfoot.
Her grandfather was friends with, I think,
the OG, the original Bigfoot
of this. He's like the patriarch of this Bigfoot family, and his name was Fox, apparently.
Yeah. And she has encounters with all of his offspring like and stuff like that. They come to her house, and she supposedly has had firsthand encounters with Bigfoots. And I mean, I'm not going to tell her that that's not true.
Sure,
she's got her own experiences. I'm not going to discredit it, but I'm a little, I think it's a little suspicious that he comes to the door and asks for cloves of garlic. I mean, her explanation behind why he asked for garlic was just spot on. It's very believable.
Yeah.
Keep ticks and maggots and fleas and stuff off of them. And without being able to go to his store and buy tick medicine like you buy for your dog or your cat. Yeah. But to not have any kind of sway of being like, hey, let me take a picture of you.
Right. Exactly.
Let me get you on footage so that the people out in the real world don't think that I'm an insane nutcase.
Yeah. But we'll come back to that because I think with modern technology nowadays, you would think that we would have more opportunity, but a lot of the sightings and everything that we have, some of the more anecdotal accounts of these Bigfoot encounters, they're a little dated, 40s, 50s, 60s. So there could be some explanation in that. But so with Bigfoot, what exactly is Bigfoot? And the American Bigfoot.
The American Bigfoot is, I don't think I have to describe what a Bigfoot is to most of our listeners. I feel like everybody that has ever seen a commercial,
if you're here,
if you've seen the Jack Link's commercial, you know what he looks like in that sense.
I feel like if you're listening to this podcast, you probably already know what Bigfoot is.
But for anybody who might not know, it's basically the size of how tall he is varies 8 to 9 to 10 feet tall, 7 to 1,000 pounds. Basically a giant gorilla. Bipedal, can stand upright, looks more. There's some accounts saying he looks more man than ape, but at the same time, there's other accounts saying it's more ape than man. So, but it gets its name from having somebody had found tracks and they were out hunting, found these tracks in the woods that were like 2 feet long footprints.
Very large footprints. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Hence the name Bigfoot comes around. And that's in the 1950s. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, essentially it's a black-haired, brown-haired, or red-haired giant ape.
Basically, and that kind of checks out to what I also had found. Mm-hmm. Broad shoulders, no visible neck. That's another thing that kind of comes up, which
very like gorilla-esque.
Yeah, and that's one of the points of skepticism, where the believers versus the scientific community who claim that Bigfoot is more pseudoscience. One of the things is that because he doesn't have like a visible neck, most of the reportings from the scientific community, and when I say scientific, I'm just going to say like the non-believers in this case, the skeptics.
We would, The
skeptics think that it's more like a black bear
Yeah.
Another thing too,
Standing up on its back.
Standing on its hind legs. Another thing too is the iconic film from '67 that showed the
Patterson-Gimlin film.
Yeah, the Patterson
from 1967.
Yep,
which gives you that iconic big swinging arm movements, like anything that you ever see Bigfoot on.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
like that silhouette.
The silhouette of it, yeah. You guys probably, if you see, I promise you, if you see, just next time you see a Jeep Wrangler, take a look. that's like a common thing now.
Usually with a title that says Wander.
It's the silhouette.
Find me in the wild,
exactly.
or
some generic,
some hippie hiker bullshit.
Yeah, just like some
I will admit that I do have a journal that has that exact thing on it.
Oh, I love it. I think I have a stack of stickers of it. It's so great.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
Classic. It's iconic.
It's like
seeing the Superman crest.
Exactly. It's Bigfoot.
The Bigfoot silhouette is the Superman crest of the cryptozoology.
I have a whole stack of those stickers. I love them. But that film, one of the things that kind of comes up from the skeptical community is typically apes, gorillas, they can't turn and look back the way their upper body, like the torso, like that. Mm-hmm. So that was one of the first things that they noticed was, well, wait a minute, it's a bipedal thing. It's walking, but the way that it's turning back and looking at the camera doesn't really line up with actual behavior of gorillas, where they kind of have to turn their whole entire body.
Genetically speaking.
Yeah, genetically it doesn't make sense.
They can't do that. Which is interesting. I don't think that I ever really thought about that before.
And well, another thing too with Bigfoot, so that's the American Bigfoot, and he's more common, starts out in California, Oregon, Washington, Pacific Northwest. That's where the more iconic sightings of Bigfoot typically occur. But throughout the United States, we have other pockets of the country where there's, of course, Bigfoot sightings in like Appalachia and stuff like that, but there's there's slight variations. Areas like Louisiana, Mississippi, Florida, they have the skunk ape. One of the things, though, that's interesting, another kind of point from the skeptic community is primates typically don't have glowy eyes.
Correct. Eye shine
or whatever. But there's a lot of reported sightings of, Bigfoot, I saw this thing and it was 8 feet tall and it had glowing red eyes or glowing yellow eyes. Like, I think there's a photo, if you type in skunk ape on Google, you can pull up, it honestly, in my opinion, it looks like an orangutan. like somebody photoshopped an orangutan into this bush and made it blurry. But it has glowing eyes. That's not really common with primates or, humans. So either it's the explanation is that, maybe it's like a barn owl, or back to the fucking barn owls. Maybe it's like an owl.
It's always a barn owl.
It's always a barn owl. And then maybe it's an owl or some sort of bird-like creature that has that.
Yeah. Could be a cat of some sort, I think, because cats have eye shine, right?
Yeah. But do bears?
I don't think bears do.
No.
But I mean, you're thinking like Pacific Northwest. I mean, you probably have lynxes, mountain lions. Yeah. In the South, I'm sure you have, I don't know what is native big cat. I don't know if there's a big cat that's native to like the South and the bayous and stuff.
There's panthers down there.
Is there?
That's the Florida Panthers, the hockey team.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, but and you have the Carolina Panthers too in football. But I didn't think that was because it was a thing that you find in those regions.
There are like panthers like in Florida.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I said the same thing. I was like, why?
It's just a team name.
I was like, why Florida Panthers? I was like, there actually are like panthers apparently in the Everglades.
So yeah, I mean, you could see a panther up in a tree somewhere, and he's sitting on a branch who's 9 feet high, haul up in the air, and you look and see a panther, and its eyes are shining.
Naturally thinking, because the way that our minds function, we tend to make sense of what we see.
Right.
So you see something glowing up in a tree like that.
A visual matrix happens.
Yeah, naturally you're going to be, okay, well, what the fuck is standing up there that's that tall?
Right.
It was the whole thing.
Because a black panther, I mean, if it's dark out, you're not going to see the rest of it.
Because you're just going to see the eyes.
Right.
And if you're in an area like Florida or whatever, where you probably don't.
God, could you imagine going around in Florida and outside of all the Florida man things, we could do an episode on the Florida man.
Yeah. Everything wild just happens in Florida. Remember that guy that ate that dude's face like 10 years ago from bath salts?
Yeah, that's when they thought the zombie apocalypse was going to happen. It was like 2012.
Yeah, it was like crazy.
Right around the time where the world was supposed to end.
Yeah, yep.
But Florida's just got a bunch of weird shit in it, so I'm sure there's weird sounds and weird noises all the time. You can see I mean, for God's sakes, I couldn't imagine running into a panther. in the Florida wilderness.
Yeah, exactly. And that was just very recently that I found that out because Little Man's like obsessed with that's his favorite team. It's because they won the
They won
the Stanley Cup last year. So he was like, oh man, and I was like, and I was looking it up, and yeah, apparently they have it. So
fair enough.
Yeah. So yeah, it makes sense that there's lots of points of like contention between the skeptics and the non-skeptics because it's pretty common with like any sort of like paranormal. One thing that the believers always come back to is, okay, well, if it's not really a thing, if this is all like bogus, why are there so many sightings then? Why are there so many reported, that's one of like their
talking points.
One of their talking points. Whereas the skeptics are kind of like, okay, just because
there's so many sightings because people want to be saying that they had a sighting.
It's like, you guys have a bias essentially. Like you're going to see something in the sky if you believe in UFOs. If you can't explain it or whatever, initially you're going to think, oh God, aliens, it's a UFO. Right. Same thing with like the Bigfoot community.
Right. And people just like to be stats, I think.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? Just because people claim to have seen Bigfoot doesn't mean that they actually have.
The BFRO has received nearly 75,000 reported sightings of Bigfoot.
And what is the BFRO?
That is the Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization.
Sounds very official. I kind of want a t-shirt with that on it.
So if you've ever been on the website, I remember actually looking at this a while ago. They were founded in 1995. And I think if you go on their website, it actually pulls up like a map or a global map of all the reported sightings. Right. And I think it even breaks it down by like recent sightings. So I'm sure there are people on there constantly updating that. And this isn't the first, like this isn't like a crazy new thing. You could find the same type of like data for like UFOs and aliens and stuff like that. It was funny actually, a couple of years ago, I saw this weird like lantern, like a Chinese lantern in the sky. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't the only person that saw it because I just Googled it, like weird Chinese lantern sighting in Maryland. And I found this website, kind of Reddit like or whatever. And it was, people were like, hey, have you guys seen this? And so I just saw this in like Williamsport, Maryland. And I was like, oh, it's probably the same thing that I just saw. Again, it was like around this time of the year though. So the Chinese New Year, I'm not surprised that I saw that.
Well, that's true. That's true. You're just not looking up to expect to see a Chinese lantern floating by. So
it was really weird because I think I was like in the backyard smoking the cigarette or something. And literally it just right above, I was like, where the hell did that come from? But I remember Brittany and I were driving on like another kind of close to around that time. This one was a little bit more weird though. We saw kind of a flickering light in the sky, and the thing that made it so weird was the way that it ascended so quickly. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking, well, maybe it was a gust of wind that kind of like undershot it and it kind of blew it upwards, but it looked like it was kind of moving back and forth, and then it kind of just beamed off over like the mountains. And I was like, I don't know if a lantern would do that. That was kind of questionable. Yeah, I was like, But it was kind of iconic. It was just really weird that like I saw that first Chinese lantern. I was like, right. Clearly, I was like, oh, it's a lantern. Like, where did that come from? And then we saw that other thing a couple nights later, and I was like, I don't think those two were related. Yeah. But yeah, back to like the BFRO. If you go on their website, I think you can actually contact them and report like your actual sighting, and they'll kind of document it and walk you through.
Oh, wow.
I think it's the gist of it. But yeah,
I'm sure it's like day, time, location, what he looked like, et cetera, et cetera.
Pretty much. Yep. They kind of keep, articles and reports on actual Bigfoot sightings, and it's just a community where they try to approach. It's kind of like, what's the Bufon, I think. The for the UFO, I think it's Bufon for UFOs.
I have no idea.
The Bureau, I think it's Bufon. Yeah, MUFON. That's what it is. MUFON. Yeah, MUFON is the Mutual UFO Network. Basically the same thing, where it's a bunch of actual scientists, PhDs, medical doctors, where they gather all this data and they try to collect it, analyze it, and try to find credible evidence and try to prove that these things actually exist.
God bless those people.
Yeah, right. Or BFRO is kind of the same thing, but for Bigfoot. So anthropologists, scientists, they look at these reports, they analyze the data. And I think they actually even on there tell you of all of the cases that we've looked at, only this percentage we actually believe is credible.
Okay.
I'm not sure what the criteria is for what they deem like a credible sighting versus a non-credible.
I was going to say, like, if I called in right now, I was like, oh yeah, I seen a Bigfoot walking across the street in Williamsport, Maryland. Is that it? They're like, okay, we'll put it down. We'll log it. Or is there a?
I'm sure there's a questioning, like a screening process to analyze that. Like with MUFON, they probably are looking at things. I would assume that if somebody calls in like a UFO sighting, they're probably looking at a lot of factors. Like, okay, what
time
was
of day? What
was the weather like?
Because we also kind of discussed that a little bit when it came to the Mothman sightings in Chicago.
Yeah.
And we were talking about how it kind of there was more credibility because they specifically remember the weather and the moon positions and stuff like that they just seen this thing. And it's like, okay, well, since there's such a detailed report there,
and they're
a
probably
little more credence.
Yeah, there's more detail, and the fact that they can provide more details like that allows the researchers to kind of compare and like cross-reference. Okay, this person's reporting that they saw, Bigfoot or Mothman or whatever at the 2:00 on this day. What was the weather like? They're saying it was sunny. They go back, look at the weather report for that day. It was sunny that day. Okay, cool. So that the more things that they can kind of check off their box that, okay, this lines up with what they're actually saying,
right,
probably like improves that credibility. I'm going to guess that they're probably, using some sort of similar criteria with, a Bigfoot sighting, but who knows? But if you ever get a chance, check out the BFRO, and do your own research there.
I wonder if they have like a lab or a headquarters somewhere that you can go visit or talk to them.
They're probably at one of the many Bigfoot conventions that show up, paranormal cons or whatever. They probably show up there.
Yeah. I was going to say, before we get into kind of that stuff, because that's a good topic to get into, do you want to maybe talk a little bit about where he comes from? So, because like we said, this is the grandfather of cryptids.
From what I've seen, there's a couple different, you can kind of go down rabbit holes as to like what Bigfoot, where he kind of originates from. We had talked about maybe doing an episode strictly on like the history of Bigfoot,
which is kind of some bullet points of.
Yeah. So pretty much any culture that you look at, you're going to find instances of a Bigfoot like, creature. With Native American culture in the United States, he's often referred to as like a Sasquatch. Mm-hmm. So in their mythos and their cultural tellings of it, he's been around forever.
Right.
He's
like a
ancient
spirit guardian.
Yeah,
of
he's
the
like
forest
ancient,
and stuff.
pretty much. In Nepal, you have in the Himalayas
the
Yeti, which is essentially the same thing but more suited for the climate and the snow. So whereas the American Bigfoot has the brown, black, red hair, the Nepal the Yeti, white hair, still 6, 7, 8 foot tall, the iconic giant foot,
iconic giant foot.
The giant foot. You can actually see where there's a photo you can actually see of the original Yeti. Apparently, it was taken by the Nepal military, I believe. But there's footprints going up like the side of a mountain. Giant like footprints in the snow. I'm a little skeptical about that because like if you actually look at the photos, it's kind of at a weird angle, and I'm thinking like, okay, the angle that the photo was taken of, it kind of makes the footprints look a little bit longer. Like there's no, I would be more.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
like
so
a depth of field,
the depth of field kind of thing. And so it's only that one photo, to the best of my knowledge. That's the only photo they grabbed of it. I would want to see a more like up close. Kind of like how when you see a photo of like a foot casting, it's like a ruler and then it's like the foot casting, whatever, you know? And then Australia, they have like the Yowie, the Aborigines. Supposedly in Australia, he lives and there's a mountain over there out in like the bush that it's like a reddish black mountain, I think. Apparently he lives like in the mountain, the Yowie, or like a race of Bigfoots that live there. Huh. So there's theories that Bigfoot he could either be very intelligent, like he can talk, like, he asks for garlic knocking on your door.
I think I could maybe be making this up, but I also think I heard he could be again, this is very out there, but he could use telepathy to put the thoughts, like how he's communicating to you into your brain.
Yeah. There's other theories where he is like an interdimensional being.
Yes.
And can kind of hop in, which would explain why he's so hard to catch.
Yeah.
He is very intelligent. He doesn't want to be found. He has the ability to kind of hop in between dimensions. That's one theory as to where he kind of comes from. He kind of lives in the spaces between spaces.
Right.
There's theories that he's actually an alien, that he comes from some other planet and he just managed to find his way to Earth, and he's been studying us for, for however long he's been here.
Yeah.
And then I think the most common accepted theory is that if there is a Bigfoot, it's probably an undiscovered, primate or species of ape that we just haven't discovered yet.
Right.
But has a heightened level of intelligence to where it knows to kind of keep away from humans. Mm-hmm. And that's why, it's like just really, really deep in like the forest, isolated,
I mean, that could be just a simple case of evolution too. I mean, a wild ape gets loose somewhere 100,000 years ago. No, well, it doesn't get loose, but just goes and lives under the caves or whatever. And just generation after generation, they start to adapt to being able to camouflage themselves better, not necessarily being like invisible or using wormholes, but they can just camouflage themselves. They can, like you were saying, they know to stay away from hot spots, and more or less they know to avoid the typical traps. Yeah, you see like Bigfoot exposition and stuff like that, or expedition. And were you there when we were watching the one day and they were like nailing like Big Macs to the trees and like baby dolls? And they're like, yeah, there's one thing Bigfoot loves. It's Big Macs and babies. That's can't resist the tender flesh of a human infant.
That's a whole nother thing. Is like just I would be more interested in doing like an episode on just some of the
crazy theories,
and the customs.
The ways to catch a Bigfoot.
You can always hear a Bigfoot in your backyard. I had a neighbor, or I had a buddy years ago. I wouldn't even call him a buddy. We'll just say
he was a neighbor.
He was a very
acquaintance.
I worked with him at Home Depot. He was very, very into Bigfoot. Okay. Dude was convinced that he saw Bigfoot when he was a kid. That he was at it was like, I think he said he was from Georgia. And him and his cousins were at like a summer cabin that they would go to every year. And he was on the second floor and he heard like a knock on the window, and him and all his cousins turned around, and he was like, there was a man, like an ape-like man staring through the window and just let out this like loud ass roar. But he was like, what was weird about it was where he was standing on the window, he had to have been standing on top of like the AC unit on the first floor. Outside, so like there was a window on the first floor, there was an AC unit, and he said it was like a 12-foot tall, like cabin or whatever. So he would have had to have been standing on the AC to be head height with the window there. And I was like, but doing the calculations, that would have meant that they had to have been at least like 8 feet tall or whatever to stand there. Dude was like passionate. But I remember we were in his backyard, and I think it was like I forget where, Middletown or some shit. And he heard like a random knock, and he was like, did you hear that? And I was like, no, like there it is again, like knocking. I don't recall hearing the knocking, but he was like, that is Bigfoot. And he was like, the tree knocking. He was like going on about like, that's how Bigfoot kind of alerts. I don't know if it's to find other Bigfoot in the area, or if it's to alert,
like an echolocation system.
Or if it's kind of like a way to see, ward off other people. Like, hey, I'm in the area, so like knock on trees or whatever. But you can look it up. It is a thing. Like tree knocking with Bigfoot it's one of the ways to try to find one.
Interesting.
Because they'll respond back. If you knock on a tree and you hear like a knock back, supposedly it's another Bigfoot.
Like an intelligent.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a way to communicate.
All right. Well, I'll take his word for it. It's like we're not here to discredit or.
I don't want to call the way that he described it. I genuinely believe that. Okay, you saw something because something like I believe him. Right. It's just
like if you see something that is that impactful on you.
Yeah, he said that was like so. Yeah, he clearly saw something. I don't want to discredit him. I believe him without a doubt that he probably did see something.
Yeah.
What that was.
Now, whether or not his methods on how to track one are valid or not is a different story.
But just doing an episode on some of like the ways to communicate or to attract or catch one. to find one.
That was still to this day it just sticks in my brain that they were nailing little baby dolls to the tree.
I don't remember seeing that, but I believe it. I believe it.
Yeah, it was so funny. I was dying. It was so funny.
I believe it. Yeah, it's just people.
If there's one thing that they can't resist, it's the tender flesh of an infant and a Big Mac.
Well, you remember how he was portrayed in Red Dead Redemption?
Yeah,
you find
which is a great representation of
Undead Nightmare. Like you go to find him, and he's actually this really intelligent species, and he's like actually talking to John Marston. Well, you eat babe? He's like, we eat berries.
Yeah. Like, some lunatics going around killing all of my brothers and sisters.
Family. Yeah. Like, oh well, I don't know who that is. But he's portrayed as this carnivorous creature
in regular or in not in that game. He was portrayed because he's like, no, he eat berries. He was like he's a vegetarian. And
I'm saying, like, in the
legend
game,
had been misconstrued to him going into towns and eating.
Yeah, so it's like kind of talking about the baby thing or whatever. Like, it's like he's portrayed as this, like, which I mean, that's not crazy. It's pretty common amongst like anecdotal reports of Bigfoot that he always is like screaming or like. Construction workers, like, timbering out, in like the forest, they come back the next day and all their equipment's like destroyed or whatever like that.
Yeah.
It kind of sounds like he's more territorial than anything.
I would assume so. Yeah.
That's a lot. If you look at a lot of the anecdotal reports, it's, people in the cabin and I saw this giant creature with red eyes was like not being very friendly, kind of knocking on my windows, rattling my home or whatever. It sounds like he's more territorial, and wants you to kind of like get out of the area. Which,
I mean, I'm not a monkey expert by any means, but it sounds like gorilla behavior.
Yeah, they're territorial. Yeah, it's the
primal primate instinct.
The alpha, where they'll be sitting there with their family and like if they hear like another male gorilla kind of like, puffing. That's what the whole chest puffing or beating on the chest comes from.
Okay.
Because they're kind of like trying to ward off like another, male gorilla.
Coming in, snatching his hose up.
Pretty much, yeah. It's like taking. And then I'm not sure, like I know with like lions, like they will kill the offspring of the other alpha because they don't want and try to rebreed or whatever. So I'm not sure if like it's the same. I would imagine it's the same with like apes.
Probably. Animal Kingdom's a weird place, man.
Yeah, it's unhinged. Have you ever seen the on Instagram Nature's Metal?
I haven't.
Yeah, you should look it up. It's crazy. It's a
lot of animal brutality.
It's wildlife photos and videos of just how unhinged nature can be. You probably saw the video a couple months ago, maybe over the summer, of the deer with the other deer head lodged in his antler, got a fight and like ripped off the other head. He's just walking around with this like decapitated deer. Yeah, Nature's Metal. It's basically that.
Oh man. So we'll switch gears here a little bit. Like you were saying earlier about the Bigfoot conventions and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So clearly Bigfoot has had a major impact on pop culture, societal cultures and stuff like that. It's just kind of captured the imaginations of people across the United States and probably the world. But you want to talk a little bit about the Bigfoot conventions and what goes on in those places, if you know anything about them?
The Smoky Mountain Bigfoot Conference, held in Gatlinburg, is considered to be one of the largest, if not biggest, Bigfoot convention in the United States.
It features educational sessions, vendors, speakers, and it's open to the public. So you can just go and learn about Bigfoot. I'm assuming that most of the people that go to these conventions, at least panelists, are cryptozoologists. And
I'm sure.
Doctors and professors.
I'm sure. What was the one professor? He's probably there. If not, he's been there a couple times. Yeah. Jeffrey Meldrum. Jeffrey, for our listeners out there, if you ever get a chance, look up the work of Jeffrey Meldrum. Don Jeffrey goes by Jeff, last name Meldrum. He's a professor of anatomy and anthropology in the Department of Biological Sciences at Idaho State University. But he's pretty well known because what brought him to fame in the Bigfoot world is he has all these castings of Bigfoot. He's done a lot of extensive research on like the Bigfoot prints and castings, and he's thoroughly convinced that, Bigfoot is an actual thing. Like this is an actual creature that we have not discovered yet. What makes him interesting though is because he's like an actual anthropologist. He's applying a lot of like the research methods that he's learned from anthropology. He's also an occupational therapist, so he has like really good extensive knowledge of like anatomical sciences. So he's like looking at these prints and saying this is actually like genuine. This couldn't have been man-made or faked or manufactured, because if you look at the way that this tendon connects to this foot here, this is like a legit thing.
Something if it is a fake, somebody really knows their shit.
Yeah, it's either somebody really knows like the anatomy of like the human Bigfoot foot, or he's saying like, no, this is like an actual thing, like, because like look at the way that it's like, pressed in the dirt. But really, really huge in the field of Bigfoot. Kind of, you can look him up on like YouTube. There's just so many
I'm sure he does seminars all over the place.
Yeah, he's all over.
I'm sure he's at a lot of these conventions.
No, yeah, I'm sure he's like if you hear him talk too, he's pretty knowledgeable in like what he's saying.
I bet he is. You also have the Great Florida Bigfoot Conference, the Hocking Hills Bigfoot Festival. Most of these take place seems like mostly in the summertime, I guess, when you're mostly out looking for Bigfoot.
I think there was something not too far from around here.
You have the Virginia Bigfoot Convention.
Maybe that's what it was. I thought it was in like Harper's Ferry this year. Some of that had some sort of like Bigfoot. So it was really close. I remember seeing it. And I was like, I kind of want to go to that. It was like semi-local.
Just looking at the Virginia Bigfoot Convention, be guest speakers, arts and crafts, Bigfoot vendors and food vendors, raffles, face painting, and more. So it sounds like they just kind of take this and just run with it and just make it a big festival of Bigfoot. I guess kind of like Mothman Festival over in Point Pleasant.
I don't know. I'd love to go to one. I've never been to a Bigfoot convention. I bet it's wild. I bet it would be an experience.
Oh, for sure.
We should make it
a point to get to a Bigfoot festival.
Just to visit one once. That'd be really cool. But no, popular culture, like he really is like everywhere.
Oh yeah.
The Jack Link's commercials. Mm-hmm. He's pretty much like the mascot.
Yep. He is, in fact, the mascot of the Jack Link's brand now. Like I said, he's just ingrained in almost every fabric of like hiking culture.
Yeah.
You can't look at almost any product without that silhouette of Bigfoot being on it.
Something, yeah. He's
like I said, the bumper stickers, the mugs.
Bumper sticker, yeah. He's
with the silhouette.
There's a guy going out towards your place. Not going up towards Cunningham. That has like the iconic,
he has the big cutout, like the big cutout. Yeah, it's on the side of his house.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that guy. There was a dude actually in our neighborhood here that had the same thing.
Yeah. It's like synonymous with woods and nature.
What's so interesting though is 50 years ago, 60 years ago, believing in this idea of Bigfoot, you would have been looked at as like a crazy person or quack.
Well,
to an extent.
I was going to say, I would almost argue against that and saying 50 years ago, it was more likely that if you said, I believe in Bigfoot, they'd be like, oh yeah, me too. Like, because it was so new, I guess, at the time, or not new, but more plausible because there wasn't as many things that you could scientifically disprove it with. Now you have, like we said, the castings, the case studies, the DNA samplings, we have the technology now that when you bring a piece of hair to a forensics office and like, hey, I think I found a Bigfoot. I think that I don't know what this hair's from.
Sure.
They're like, okay, we'll take it. And a week later, like, yeah, this came from a deer.
Yeah.
It's a white-tailed deer.
Sure. Okay. From that.
But 50 or 60 years ago, they'd be like, hey, I found this hair off of in the forest. I don't know what it is. It doesn't look like a deer hair. And then they're like, well, it could be a Bigfoot.
Sure. Okay. From that standpoint, sure, that's fair. Where it was the DNA evidence, the scientific methods that we have now today with like DNA testing and stuff like that, it wasn't where it was 60 years ago. So sure, right. From a skeptical standpoint, you really didn't have a whole lot of tools at the time to really contest that for sure. Whereas nowadays, yeah, we have more options.
But I see where you're coming from.
Yeah, I'm saying, but today he's more of accepted as like a cultural, like,
yeah, a cultural
everybody
icon.
Loves Mothman. Everybody loves Mothman. Right. It's the same thing with Bigfoot.
Almost like a meme.
Yeah, exactly. People love him. Yeah.
But it's still, if you kind of like we were just talking about your friend who's seen him at there, it's like you listen to that story and you're like, did you really see Bigfoot? So I get where you're like, it's a cultural standpoint. If you have a Bigfoot sticker on your car, nobody's going to look and it says wander on it. Nobody's going to be like, What a freak! What a weirdo!
He comes up in conversation now so casually, where it's like, "Oh, I saw a Bigfoot or whatever," and like it's you might question that, but you're not kind of like you're more open to it. He might have seen something.
Maybe.
You know, it is what it is.
Yeah.
But people were kind of we love him. He's kind of like the American mascot now. The people
Pretty
love
much,
Bigfoot. Yeah.
Like we said in our cryptid draft, he's the guy bringing the apple pie to the. He's the all-American.
Rolls up in a Ford Bronco.
He's playing quarterback for the local college team.
Yeah, in his like bomber jacket, you know, like
The varsity jacket.
The varsity jacket, you know, the aviators just rolls up with apple pie and a 6-pack of like Budweiser or Coors Light. You know?
And his Jack Links, American flag bandana tied around his head.
Yeah, with his beard, you know.
Oh yeah,
blasting Leonard Skinner or something like that.
Oh, hell yeah, brother. Hell yeah, brother.
He knows. Like, that's exactly what he's gonna be. So. People love him, and I don't think he's going anywhere anytime soon.
Oh, he's definitely not going anywhere.
I don't think he has the cultural impact as like the Yeti, and maybe I could be wrong. I really can't speak on how the Yeti is like looked at as an example in like the Himalayas. Mm-hmm. Like if we go over there, is the Yeti imbued in their culture to like comparable to like American culture where like everybody has bumper stickers over there, you know?
All the snowplows have Yeti.
Yeah, exactly. You know,
well, I mean, if you think about it, the coolers and stuff are called Yetis. Yeah, I don't know if that, I don't know if there's any connection there, but
I'm not sure. But he's definitely not going anywhere, and he's here to stay.
Definitely not. So let's talk about, what do you think about Bigfoot? Do you think he's real? Do you think he could exist?
I think so.
Yeah.
And I'm leaning, and the reason why I say that I'm leaning more on the work of Meldrum and him.
A more scientific approach.
I am a believer that they is fairly intelligent, and they probably know, like, to stay away. That's why, like, if they really wanted to be found, they would have been. They would have made it.
They'd be popping out in front of in Times Square, you know. Just
but if they can like think consciously and have like that forethought, and you know, not want to be found, I am a firm believer that like they have to venture out and probably get food and stuff like that. That's why they're doing that.
Right.
That's why we're finding the footprints. But it's the fact that it's always in like an isolated pocket out in like the deep wilderness or whatever.
Especially the Pacific Northwest.
Like that forest out there.
But yeah, to be up in the Pacific Northwest where you have like the redwood forest and stuff like that, there's no way that you can possibly cover that vast expanse of woodland and even just like the Great Plains and stuff like that.
Okay, let me ask you this. With modern like drone technology, with modern there's a semi-new technology called LiDAR, which essentially it's a drone. And what it does is it's flying above these like isolated areas, and it has a sensor on it, and it pings down to the ground, and it like reflects back up to this like sensor thing, and it actually maps out what is like beneath the forest floor.
Right.
It was used. There was some like crazy, I think in like Mexico, like or maybe in like the Amazon.
I feel like we've talked about this.
We might have,
yeah.
Where they used it and they actually found like not a civilization, but they found a bunch of ancient ruins that nobody's been to in God knows how long because it's been overgrown by the forest. But they were actually able to map it out in like pretty clear detail. I wonder are there parts of like the redwood forest that it's been here for thousands and millions of years or whatever?
Oh yeah.
Even though it's part of the United States and we know like where the border is, have we actually gone through and like mapped out and like been to every part of it, do you think?
I don't think so. I mean, it's possible because you do have like the roads running through the redwood forest. So it's possible that they had to do some sort of at least rudimentary engineering to figure out how to get these roads through without damaging the forest. So
something, but like the parts where we haven't really touched, we know it's there because we have like the coastline border. We know where it's encompassed or encased in, but have we actually ventured to every part of it? And like,
that's tough to say. I would assume
you would think yes.
You would think yes. You would think yes.
Like in modern, like in the,
it's hard to imagine a scenario where, like you said, in today's day and age, where there hasn't been a part of the United States that hasn't been visited.
Yeah.
With the vastness of, like I said, the Great Plains, the Pacific Northwest, even the bayous and stuff down south. And,
yeah, we like explored every part of like the deep bayou, like.
But just because you've explored it once doesn't mean that a Bigfoot couldn't be hiding out there somewhere. Because it's like, okay, they went through here one time.
Sure. Yeah.
They haven't been back since.
Yeah.
So, do I think that it's all been at least visited and established? Yeah, I don't think there's probably any part of the
redwood forest,
the northern or the hemisphere we're in, that hasn't been seen by a human eyeball.
Sure. Yeah, true.
Whether or not it's been in the last 200, 300, 400, 500 years, who knows? No. But at some point it had to have been seen or discovered to get the map and the topography and geography of the land.
Going back to what a few minutes ago you asked about, so do you believe in Bigfoot too? I think another talking point, or like I guess piece of evidence that would make me say yes, is the fact that it's so imbued in like the historical culture. Mm-hmm. And it's like kind of with like the Great Flood, where people ask like, well, do you think the Great Flood happened? I think something did happen, because if you look at every single culture around the world, there is some report or some oral telling or history that a Great Flood happened.
Yeah, well, and then wasn't there fossilized evidence somewhere like near in like the Himalayas or something like that of some sort of animal's remains being like thousands of feet higher up than its natural habitat?
I think so. I think there is. Yes, I've seen reports of that too, where they find like fossilized remains like way high up in the mountains.
Yeah,
and then also too, they did like a topography thing somewhere like Europe, I think.
Right.
Where they were kind of looking at the soil levels, and they're like, look at this level here. Like this is not like natural here or whatever. Mm-hmm. And they were saying like this is proof that something happened where like this is the sediment that's like pretty common around. Like I think that's what they were like was the distinction of it. But just from like an oral telling standpoint,
right.
Babylonian, South American, there's all tellings of like some sort of Great Flood, and the same thing kind of runs in line with, Bigfoot. The wild men, the Australian, they have the Yowie. So I think that it's pretty common around the world that, there's so many retellings of it that, okay, something's running around, because like there's so many legends and myths of this like wild, hairy beast.
Yeah. And not to get too off into the weeds, but I think it's interesting how those kinds of things happen with almost across the board with things, where you have the Egyptian gods, you have the Norse gods, you have the Mayan gods, and all these pantheons of gods have a centralized, they have a one god at the top, Odin or Zeus or somebody like that, who is like the god above all the other gods. And then there's the other ones, and they're all like very similar to each other. So it makes you wonder how these cultures who didn't have water travel or could traverse either way, how did they end up with the same pantheons?
I just read an article yesterday in the news that was talking about that, where I think it was in South America. I think there was one in like Norway or something like that. And then there was another one in like Asia somewhere, where it was like a hieroglyph, like a cave painting. But they looked pretty identical. Mm-hmm. And they did like study on it. Like the Egyptian one or whoever was, like one was like 2,000 years older than the other one. One was like 10,000 years, like, older than the other one. But they all looked pretty similar, and they were all in like geographical different parts of the world. Mm-hmm. So they were kind of saying like, okay, how could these three different cultures split by a great amount of time, but also a great amount of distance?
Right.
How are they all kind of drawing the same thing on this like cave painting or whatever? And the idea was, okay, clearly these people saw something, and that where they depicted the same representation of whatever. Right. I think it was like an angel or like a flying beast or something, like a god or something. But yeah, it kind of like goes in line with what you're saying. Yeah. It's kind of like a human instinct where we have to like categorize.
I was going to say, it's not, exactly. As humans, you want to justify, you want to explain something. Yeah. Why does it rain? Why does it storm? Sure, why does this happen? Obviously somebody's in charge of it.
Yeah. So it's like, it's come from something, but we create these like hierarchies in our mind.
Right.
Or these,
because not a mortal man can control the thunder and the lightning. That's got to be somebody else. So there's Thor, he's controlling, and then, or you have Zeus, or you have whoever. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I think it's easier to explain something in that sense. So each culture can definitely have their own taste, or not their own taste, their own take on how those gods appear and what they look like and what they do. but like you were saying, at a rudimentary source, just to explain something and to make our feeble human brains accept it and acknowledge it. Be like, because without scientific evidence, now pressure systems and moisture in the air and this and that. This is what causes lightning and thunder.
But 2,000, 3,000 years ago, that was
it was a man in the sky throwing a hammer on a mountain, causing thunder.
Because that made sense to them,
right? Exactly.
And so, but today,
but I think it's just so interesting how they all are so similar.
Oh yeah,
even with like you were saying, the time and the distance involved between all these cultures.
Have you ever read the book "The Man with 1,000 Faces" or "The Hero 1,000" by Joseph Campbell? It's basically that he's talking about that. So I think he talks about Lord of the Rings and Star Wars and stuff. It's the idea of
the hero's journey.
The hero's journey, basically, but he's saying that he looks at like cultures around the world, and he's like, hey, this is pretty much every single religious, like story, myth or whatever, all has like follows the same template, of
like I said, a leader of the pantheon, a Zeus or an Odin.
There's a Zeus, there's an Odin. In the hero's journey, there's normally like a young hero essentially who
a tragic event happens.
Something happens, starts like this journey or whatever.
And then they meet the mentor, Obi-Wan Kenobi or Gandalf.
Yeah, exactly. There's always like some sort of like setback or whatever, where it's like testing him or whatever, and then then he triumphs through and like overcomes that to get So I think it's pretty common amongst like our species where we kind of like categorize things like this, and it's pretty much common around the world, whether it's the hero's journey, whether it's a great flood, or whether it's like so
the hero's journey is call to adventure, meeting a mentor, crossing a threshold, trials and failure, growth of new skills, death and rebirth, revelation, change, atonement, gift, returns changed, in the end.
Yeah, exactly. And
anyways.
You can. But really, you could apply that to any scenario.
I wonder what Bigfoot's hero's journey would be.
I don't know. I need to see that new Bigfoot movie with Eisenberg.
Oh yeah,
or it's like a black comedy.
How weird.
So black. It's like a black comedy, basically.
But it's just so strange to me. It's Jesse Eisenberg and Riley Keough.
Who's Riley Keough? Was she?
Believe it or not, Elvis's granddaughter.
Oh.
I was like, could you imagine telling Elvis in 1973, hey, by the way, your granddaughter is going to be in a movie where she plays a Sasquatch? He'd be like, what?
So what are your thoughts? Where do you stand on Bigfoot and your beliefs on him?
I think that Bigfoot existed at some point. Whether or not he still exists, to be seen. But I think that he definitely existed at some point, and whether or not it's in a traditional sense of how we know him now, where he's like the meme king, meme culture hiker dude, or if it was more like a wild man who a social outcast who went to live in the mountains and became a hermit, became a hermit, and then that story just kind of got told, retold, so on and so forth. And then, I mean, the thing when you try to look at it scientifically, back in the 1400s, pirates and stuff like that, what are they doing? They're going to exotic places, bringing animals that have no business being in the North Americas.
Sure, that's one explanation. Yeah.
Bringing a monkey from the tropical rainforest and releasing him into the Florida wilderness. Sure, it could survive for a while, evolves, changes, and then, I mean, I don't know what the lifespan with something like that would be, but genetically over time, starts to adapt to its new environments, becomes a 7-foot tall, 900-pound gorilla looking man because it adapted. Or even in those times, I guess you could argue that it could have been crossbreeded because there was no rules back then. I mean, and
there was a scientist from Russia back in the 30s and 40s. He was trying to create a super soldier, and he was trying to do that by crossing a
man with gorillas, right?
It was a woman with I think he inseminated gorilla sperm DNA into a woman and try to like create a baby that way.
Right.
I don't know what the outcome of it was. I don't know if he actually made it that far and was shut down. I know he got nixed for it. Like they were like, you can't do this.
As he should.
Yeah, you can't do this. It's like unethical.
But I mean, again, back in the 1400s, who knows? Who knows what could have happened? So could a Bigfoot exist in a very hard-nosed scientific way? Sure, I think it could, just based on the factors of you just don't know. what they were doing. You can't keep tabs on every single person in the golden age of piracy and what they were bringing into the coastal Florida shorelines or whatever.
True. That's one way. Maybe they did that. I think with like the Native American tribes though.
I think that's more because that's like we talked like with Courtney about that kind of stuff where it can be seen as a spirit, like a guardian of the forest or something along those lines where you know that there is like a cultural icon.
Saying in their way. He would have been here long or something. The idea of it like a lot longer. I think it's been in the United States.
Right. I think there could be I think there could be an argument made that the mythological status of the Bigfoot goes back way further than where the myth ends and the scientific part starts.
Yeah.
So could a 9-foot gorilla like a prehistoric type animal that walked? Sure. I think that could have been a thing.
Isn't it crazy to think that what are those birds? Like French Polynesia. They were like 9 foot tall, 8 foot tall. They weren't terror birds, but they were similar to the idea of a terror bird. Yeah. But we can find fossils of their eggs. They were hunted into very recently, of like 1700s. So not very long ago. Yeah. And it's like crazy to think that there was like these 10-foot giant birds running around this island that were like killed for their eggs.
Well, and by that stat or by that argument, you could say, who knows? Maybe the Bigfoots were a thriving colony, and Native Americans started hunting them for sport or for food or something, and then unknowingly wiped them all out.
Yeah, that's so crazy. It's not hard to believe.
Yeah. So, do I think that Bigfoot exists? I could be convinced either way. I think the lack of hard scientific fact lends itself to say no, Bigfoot probably doesn't exist, but the curiosity and the fact that he's not really, like, it's never gone away and people still see him.
Yeah, exactly.
Is basis of being like, well, I can't just dismiss it entirely. Again, going back to how could you possibly scour the entire Great Plains and the Pacific Northwest and all the bayous and anywhere. I mean, he could have migrated somewhere else, up into Canada, into Alaska, back over to, who fucking knows?
All over the place. Yeah.
I think it's a solid, healthy mix of like one could exist mixed with audio and visual matrixing of being convincing yourself into thinking what you saw. So
that's fair.
Unless Bigfoot comes and asks for garlic, in which case for sure
that he's real.
He's real, and his dick is huge.
Yeah, just freaking flopping around, like we said, grandfather cock, just
dong,
free
of any inhibitions.
Yeah, just
doesn't have to pay taxes.
Not a care in the world.
Man, wouldn't it be great if there was just like a Bigfoot hippie commune somewhere out in the middle of like Montana or Oregon?
Just like no war, no taxes,
no famine. They live forever if they want to.
Yeah, it's one of the genetic
one of the perks of being a Bigfoot, man.
Is I've been alive. I'm 500 years old, and I'm in my prime.
All they do is drink kombucha and
when John Lennon showed up,
strict vegan diets. Yeah,
when John Lennon showed up, that's when the world really.
One of the perks of being a Bigfoot, man.
Is I've been alive. I'm 500 years old, and I'm in my prime.
All they do is drink kombucha and.
When John Lennon showed up,
strict vegan diets. Yeah.
When John Lennon showed up, that's when the world really changed.
And that's when we had to go into hiding because we knew it was only a matter of time. They were going to start coming into the woods.
It's like they brought this.
But I was at Woodstock, man. I was there. Everybody was tripping balls anyway. Nobody knew.
They couldn't tell it was real. Really changed.
And that's when we had to go into hiding because we knew it was only a matter of time. They were going to start coming into the woods.
It's like they brought this.
But I was at Woodstock, man. I was there. Everybody was tripping balls anyway. Nobody knew.
They couldn't tell it was real. They're so high out of their minds.
Got to see Hendrix play at his prime.
We made eye contact, though.
I think.
I think he thought I was real.
I don't even know if he exists.
It's a legend amongst the Bigfoots that Jimi Hendrix wasn't even real. A rare sighting of Jimi Hendrix.
Cletus over there said he's seen him at Woodstock, but I don't believe him.
I think he's full of shit. That guy owes me $350.
Oh, God. All right. Well, I think that'll put a bow on this episode. I'm sure we'll talk Bigfoot in the future.
We
like you said,
even scratched the surface.
Yeah.
There's so many different.
This is like a part one of a 6-part episode series we can easily do.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you want to hear more Bigfoot talk, just let us know. We'll cover the topics that we can get to on such a broad topic. We could be here for hours talking about the ins and outs of Bigfoot. But we hope you enjoyed this episode. We hope you enjoyed your holiday season, your Christmas, your New Year's, your Hanukkah, your Kwanzaa, whatever you might be celebrating out there. And we just thank you again for the continued support of our little show here as we roll into 2025 with bigger and better cryptids.
Oh, yeah.
Better stuff all around. Hopefully we'll get better at this podcast thing. I think we're getting pretty good at it.
We're getting there. I'm excited. I think we're growing. I think we're finding our groove. We found like a baseline, and we're just going to continue to grow and get better at it. So
tell your friends about us. Look us up on Facebook, Shadows and Sightings, a paranormal podcast, Instagram, Shadows and Sightings pod, or send us an email, shadowsandsightings@gmail.com. And we'll be back next week with another new episode here on Shadows and Sightings, where we talk about all things spooky.